A warning. This episode contains descriptions of violent crime. Please listen with care.
A listener production.
"10 years ago today, Sydney came to a standstill. A lone gunman took 18 hostages captive inside the Lindt Café, some of whom escaped. Others were trapped for 16 harrowing hours. The siege ended in the deaths of 2 innocent people. Tori Johnson executed by the terrorist, and Katrina Dawson struck by a ricochet from a police bullet when the Tactical Operations Unit stormed the building. In the aftermath, public outrage boiled over as the government and police were heavily criticised for their handling of the crisis. Just weeks ago, former New South Wales Premier Mike Baird told Nine's 60 Minutes it was impossible not to be impacted by what happened, and he was later diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder.
Probably in my mind, there's a sense of I shouldn't be impacted that way. I was just there as an observer and trying to coordinate a response. Yeah, you're the Premier, you're sort of overseeing the crisis, and it's just impossible not to feel guilt.
For 10 years, Ben Besant's name was suppressed for his own safety. He was known only as Officer A, the policeman who led the rescue operation and shot and killed the terrorist who had taken the 18 victims hostage. We'll be speaking with Ben Besant in an episode of Crime Insiders early in 2025. Some good news in light of the horror that occurred 10 years ago today. One of the hostages, Joel Herrett, who was a 21-year-old working at the cafe on the day of the siege, was married last month. His bride, Eunice Estaris, also worked at the Lindt Café, but was overseas at the time of the attack. So, let's go to the Lindt Café in Sydney's Martin Place 10 years ago today. What really happened behind the scenes? In this episode, you'll hear 2 first-hand accounts from those who lived it. You'll hear from Danny Mikati, one of the only fluent Arabic speakers in the New South Wales Police at the time, an asset that made him integral to uncovering the identity of the gunman, unearthing critical intelligence about the siege.
The Lindt Café siege, this was December 2014, 15th to 16th, a 16-hour standoff that brought downtown Sydney literally to a standstill. A lone gunman, man Harlan Monis, held 10 customers, 8 employees hostage at Lindt Café, Martin Place. 16-hour standoff culminated with one of the hostages being killed by Monis. One of the hostages was killed in crossfire, a ricochet bullet that was shot by police. Monis himself killed by the police on scene. A couple of hostages, police injured. Danny, you had some involvement in this. You got notified of this very early in the piece. Just tell us a bit about that.
So you know how it's like, mate, whenever you're looking forward to a day off, it doesn't happen. So I had just finished my run of shifts. I was working as a team leader, a sergeant of general duties at Campsie at the time, and just finished my night shift, last night shift, so enjoying probably 4 or 5 days off back then. And I remember I'd gone to a local cafe, grabbing a coffee really early in the morning. It could have been around 7 in the morning. I can't remember exactly what it was. It'd be close to that. I get a phone call from one of the detectives who's in the counterterrorism unit. And I thought it was just social, He goes, "Hey, where are you?" "I'm at the cafe, come down, So he goes, no, I'm at work. And I remember thinking that's a bit strange for him to be working at that time. He said, "Are you near a TV?" And I'm like, "Yep, the cafe's got one." He goes, "Look at Channel 7. And it was on Channel 7.
Well, they're right across the road.
Yeah,
Channel 7 from the Lindt Café.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I looked at the Channel 7 playing in the cafe, and it had live armed robbery at Martin Place. And I go, "Okay, you know how we are, armed robbery, yeah, whatever." And he goes, "Not a robbery, come in." And I went, "Okay." So I knew you couldn't explain any further. Then I get getting calls from my bosses going, "Are you coming?" "Yeah, I'm coming in." Then no one's elaborating over the phone. Get into the station and they brief me that we've had a series of incidents around the CBD of Sydney, and the Martin Place thing is linked to these incidents. So we're thinking international coordinated attack, right? Something Australia's never seen in its life.
Why did counterterrorism reach out to you? What are they looking for from you?
So I had done the terrorism investigators course, the first non-designated detective to do that course. And I had a particular good network. If you wanted to find certain people, I'd had the means of finding them. And they had concerns over the identity. They didn't know who he was at this stage. I put together a team to identify who this person was, and we did that. So the team that I was a part of identified Man Monis, and then we started finding everyone attached to him. And so his wife was a key person of interest because she was a co-offender in a current case. They were both reporting on bail. She didn't turn up to report on bail, and neither did he, obviously, because he was at Martin Place. So we had suspicion that, intel was she might have a remote detonator device, hence why you couldn't take him out.
Because he had mentioned to police, and I guess quite cleverly, that there was a number of bombs, explosives around Sydney that would be detonated if something happened to him or if they didn't follow his instructions or something.
Now,
such
the
as
issue was, and I strongly suggest people that want to know the real story about this is to get the book Tiger, 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 written by the person who ends up shooting and killing Man Monis from the TOU, a good friend of mine. And
TOU being
the Tactical Operations Unit. So like our version of the SWAT team, probably the bravest people you ever meet in your life. And there was evidence that there were multiple devices around key icons in Sydney. Hence, there was do we evacuate the city? There was all these questions.
Wow.
It was so much bigger than what the public think it was.
Right. This is all going on behind the scenes.
This is happening in real time.
And the interesting thing too, Danny, is anyone who's near a TV screen is watching this, thinking they're part of this thing where, interestingly, ironically, what you're saying is there was a hot layer upon layer upon layer going on behind this that no one will probably ever be aware of.
No, it was so bad because there was so many different layers of complexity, so many jurisdictions coming into play.
Yes.
You're briefing the Prime Minister by the hour, right? And Australia's not used to this. We've never done this. And so we're enacting these operational and tactical options that you've only ever trained for. And, training and real life are very different. There's a lot that I can't discuss.
Of course.
But at the end of the day, it's definitely not what the public thought it was. And so that you're sitting there and there's all these armchair critics going, oh, well, just take him out. And talk to the sniper that was ready to take him out and who had to leave. He never worked again after that, right? And again, read the book. It tells you the truth. The issue is that when you're in a situation where you could possibly have multiple devices going off, hundreds of thousands of people's lives are at stake. The panic of an evacuation usually can be worse than the incident itself. All of a sudden, you're crowd crushing and all this kind of stuff to consider as well. Bottlenecks in the city, and our CBD it's not geared for it. I mean, look what happens when one train line goes down.
Yeah.
Multiply that by 1,000.
Yeah.
And then it was all these possible suspects that could be his supporters. We had to go find them, make sure that they're not there. So that was part of the mandate for us. Go find these persons of interest, make sure they're still around.
And then also, I guess, at the scene at the time, who's calling the shots?
Yeah, great question.
Because I know what it's like when you get, units coming together and something like this. My understanding looking back is that one of the areas of concern was that, just to get a command through, it had to go through all these different channels and then come all the way back again. And it was almost like the left hand wasn't quite sure what the right hand was doing.
Yeah, even on the terrorism course itself, you're trained on a rolling scenario. There's a wonderful facility that we use that basically lets you be recorded audio visually in 24/7 as you're given key decisions to make, right? Very intense. It really mimics real life pressure. And the rolling scenario that was used in our terrorism course was something that was kind of close to what Lindt Café was. It was something where we had a near miss in Australia a few years before. And so even that scenario didn't go that far because we never experienced this. We don't know what happens, right?
Yes.
And it ends on a cliffhanger kind of thing. But that's the training that you've got. So the infrastructure was in place. So then you've got certain commands coming in. Now it's this commander, and as long as he's terrorism trained, he calls the shots, and then his shift ends and he hands over to the next one. As you said, it's 16 hours, right? All in all, then you've got all these people that are part of the hierarchy who are not part of this scenario, but their rank signifies that they've got some kind of level of authority. And that's not discounting the international allies we've got and what they believe should happen. I would hate to be the Prime Minister in that situation because he's just getting advice from all kinds of people. But no one's done this in this country ever before. Everything's a hypothetical. And Australia has its own unique population, its own unique challenges, and so it needs to police itself. It can't go off what happens internationally.
And then that begs the question, who is the person actually driving or controlling the scene?
Yeah.
Who is making the decisions?
Yep.
But lessons learnt, do you think that if something like that was to happen in Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, wherever tomorrow, would it be handled better, differently, do you think?
It's a great question. I can't see, in terms of our resourcing and what we've done in terms of resourcing, that we've come, I would say, a really long way since then. But I think there is enough experienced, officers at the top now that could definitely use the strategy. But in terms of soldiers and, on the boots on the ground and all that kind of capability stuff, I don't know. I know at the time it wasn't based on how many resources we had. It was more about there were so many things happening and we didn't know the truth until the end. And that was the problem. And, you know yourself, hindsight's a great thing. In the end, we didn't lose 10 lives. The stuff that happens in Crossfire in terms of ricochets and all this, you just can't account for that stuff. It's a tragic, tragic turn of events, but it's an accident.
Now we'll step inside the control room with former AFP Assistant Commissioner Chris Craner, who reflects on the eerie silence and mounting tension as Sydney's counter-terrorism network worked against the clock to save lives.
All of a sudden there was phones going off and there was silence and everyone had stopped talking to each other. And you'd sit there and you go, what's going on? Next thing, someone would have read their message quick and went, there's a bloke with a bomb. And it looks like there might be other devices around the city, being the Opera House and I think Town Hall Railway Station. So, it was quite eerie to be in a counter-terrorism phone call and then hear that saying there's someone with a bomb in the city. And it would have been probably a minute later than that. And I was sitting in William Street in the city in police headquarters, sitting up nice and high, literally, a stone's throw away from Lindt Café. And in my old world, I'll be busting to get out the door and run down there straight away, but probably being there as a chief of staff and being more strategic. But what was eerie, you could hear the sirens. And as you heard the sirens, you thought, that's our staff heading off to this. And we go to sieges all the time. I've been to many sieges at a variety of different ranks and different outcomes, but this siege just seemed different. It was just weird that it happened during a CT meeting. It was eerie sitting up on a 14th floor of a building in the city and listening to all the sirens going and not knowing what they were going to face when they got there.
So this is at the very early stages of the Lindt Café siege, and you'll be getting some information that's starting to come through, obviously, to those around the table. Where's that information coming from? Who's providing that information in these early stages that you're then acting upon?
Look, at that stage, the first thing we do once you've confirmed the trucks are on site, general duties are there, they'll confirm there's a siege. Everyone knows to go straight into what back then was contain and negotiate, and fundamentally that changed after Lindt siege with a almost shoot to kill power, so to speak. But let's go back to contain and negotiate when the police turn up. They go through a chain of command. They'll tell the radio room that it's a siege, there's a person inside, there's hostages. The radio room will then put out notifications and we'll all get notifications. And I remember running out of the room and grabbing the deputy, who was an acting deputy, Jeff Loy at the time, and giving him a briefing on what was going on. And straight away we go into emergency management. So at that stage it was in Central Metro area and Mick Fuller was the Assistant Commissioner for Central Metro. So the beast gets rolled out. Mick Fuller sets up his team and a command and control team go into the Sydney Operations Centre and they take over command and control of the whole operation as an emergency management event. And that's what it's classified at that time. So, my role was just briefing back to the deputy saying, we've got the chain of command, we've got command and control set up. This is the officer in charge. This is the forward command. So you would have to find a place down near the scene where there'd be a forward command post. And then that's kind of normally where it stays at deputy level. The AC runs it, being that this one was completely different. We ended up in the State Crisis Centre with the Premier and the Commissioner a little bit further on. But at that stage, we're just getting updates. And as soon as there's an update, there's a hint of counter-terrorism, then the deputies get together with the Commissioner. They go through a pre-formatted questionnaire, which then says, okay, stop. This is no longer a emergency management event. This is a counter-terrorism event. And at that stage, when they make that decision, then we have to chain command and control. A whole new beast comes in. And that was when Assistant Commissioner Mark Murdoch came in with his counter-terrorism team. They take over the event and they run the event.
The information that's coming out is there are numerous other locations around Sydney where there could have been explosives and things such as that. Is this what then creates that counter-terrorism type category?
Yeah, again, it comes down when they do the classification and a whole range of factors, whether that's environmental or the person themselves. I think fairly earlier on, from memory, there was an ISIS flag, so that would obviously flag it. But yeah, so definitely at the time when there was additional devices alleged to have been all around the city, then that certainly, went from, okay, this is not Joe Blow having a domestic, or this is not a stick-up gone wrong. This is a coordinated event, which looks more like a counter-terrorism type thing. So even before, if there was, the flag, if there was before that, you're right, a coordinated event like that would raise issues with counter-terrorism.
Where are you now then as things are starting to roll?
So as the day went on, it looked like this was, we were going to bed in and this was going to take some time. So I think we might have handed over to someone separate at the State Crisis Centre. Jeff Loy and I went for a drive and went down to the rugby club, which was commandeered by some staff down there, and made the police forward command. And it was quite eerie because it was a buzz. There was people running around everywhere, staff changing over from point duty, meals getting organised. And I remember opening up a broom closet. It wasn't even as big as a broom closet. And there was 2 or 3 negotiators there with headphones on, and they were having a live discussion with the hostages. And it was amazing just to look in and see everything abuzz outside. These calm, collected individuals in literally a broom closet negotiating. You just look at them and go, they are the first point of contact talking to those hostages at the moment. Like, what's going on that phone is amazing. I remember when we finally, the biggest thing we had to find out who was it, because that would then assist us to try and find what the intent is in regards to confirming it's counter-terrorism or bring it back to emergency management, who was the person inside. And eventually when, I remember diving through every bit of information I could, taking phone calls from people, and then eventually came out that it was Man Monis, and they looked up his criminal history and antecedents and intelligence, which confirmed it was staying as a CT event. But the focus really was, who's the offender?
So, Chris, we're at a stage now where the siege has been going all day. It looks like it's going to be pushing through the night into the wee small hours. What happens to you then? Do you stick around? Do you go home? What does someone in your role do at that point?
Yeah, it was quite fluent. We were trying to work out, do we go in? Do we use the cover of darkness? Do we take lights out? What's the best situation? And it was deemed at that stage, because that's what we did, was control. So it was made the decision. I was stood down probably about midnight. Deputy said to me, look, go get a hotel, stay close by, I'll call you if I need you. And I think even the Commissioner had gone home. Deputy decided to stay through the night and a skeleton staff. I rang a mate of mine who was an inspector at the city, who was driving around in a marked car, and grabbed him for a coffee because I wasn't ready to sleep after being through the day we'd been through. Sat down, had a coffee, then went to get to the hotel and thought, I haven't got any change of clothes, so undies, socks, toothbrush. I went to a 7-Eleven on Oxford Street and got what I could. Went to the hotel, put the TV on to watch a bit of it, and then literally got changed, jumped into bed. I was in bed probably 5 minutes, and the deputy rang up and said, get back to the office, go and get the other deputy, Kath Byrne. Building's been stormed, shots have been fired, people are dead and injured, get back. That was it. And that was a different feeling, driving to that State Crisis Centre and getting in there and then getting a briefing off the deputy about, I walked in and went, what the happened? What's happened? And the deputy's just explained he's had a shot. We've got 2 that we know that are dead. SPG, State Protection Group, has stormed the building. There's been flashbang shot fired and there's people injured. And that's as much as he knew at that stage. And that progressed then in the next, hour or so. You watch them all come back in and you look at their faces. The Commissioner came back in, the Commissioner's staff came back in, the Premier comes back in, the Police Minister comes back in. And maybe, 2 hours later or what it was, they were having a briefing, and we sat outside the briefing room just so we could hear what was going on in the briefing room, but operationally we could also hear what was going on so we could be dual reporting. And I remember a conversation where it was briefing to the Premier, and he obviously was quite upset that people had been injured, and it was a comment made there that it might be friendly fire, and the Premier didn't know what that was until it was explained that the shots might have been ours. And that was just another game changer of another point of the night where someone's realised, gone, shit, I didn't think of that. Like, you think if shots are fired, the offender's done it. But early on that stage, we couldn't discount the fact that there were friendly fire and people may have been injured by the cops themselves.
So if I could, Chris, just to circle back to that point where, and this information's coming through pretty thick and fast as you walk into that meeting, but shots were fired, they believe, by Monis within the cafe at some point, and that's led to the members of the SPG, the State Protection Group, storming into the cafe, and then there's an exchange of gunfire. Am I reading that correctly?
Yep.
Yeah. And in that exchange of gunfire, my understanding is man Monis was shot by police and I think passed away at the scene, and there was it one or two other of the hostages that also, maybe through ricochet or something like that, were injured?
I think it's quite well known. Tori Johnson was executed by Monis at the time. Katrina Dawson was shot and killed. And then there were others there also injured. And Louisa Hope was also injured from fragments. At that stage, I can't remember now what they were, fragments or ricochets or direct hits. But I'm pretty sure it's, the public record is Katrina Dawson was terribly shot by the police, and Louisa Hope was shot by ricochets, whether they be ours or the offenders.
Louisa Hope, who you mentioned as one of the hostages, is a person that you've remained friends with since that incident, and I believe is a huge advocate for the police and has a very unique view of this whole siege, of course, being one of the people on the inside looking out.
Yeah, lovely lady. We've stayed friends, texting each other through personal matters, through work matters. She's just a lovely lady that has come back, and I wouldn't say forgiven's not the word, but she has forgiven because she never held any ill will towards him in the first place. But she went back and met the State Protection Group. She's met the people that may have shot her, and she speaks highly about the police, and she does motivational speaking, and she does talk to events where the police are. She's just an amazing lady.
If there was a Lindt Café siege today in Sydney, what are the key differences as to how that would be handled?
Yeah, I think the legislative powers and the powers that the police now have in regards to either contain and negotiate, or in a counter-terrorism incident like that one, if there's more imminent danger, police have the chance, have the opportunity, and they can take a shot, then under direction they'll get told to take that shot. It's literally, I can't remember the name of the power. I worked so much on it when I was in the Commissioner's office, but I try and forget a lot of things. But effectively it was known by shoot-to-kill powers, where they can take the target out. Normally, unless there's a imminent threat to your life or serious injury or danger to someone or yourself, you can shoot or take whatever means necessary. This was more preemptive. So I thought if Lindt siege happened now, it would be more preemptive and a preemptive shot, and the job would be over quicker, and there'd be better collaboration, which was obviously a criticism as well. There'd be a lot better collaboration with a high-risk incident like that with other partner agencies.
I understand that in your role, you had a meeting the following morning with, amongst others, possibly members of the State Protection Group who were there to storm the cafe. That must have been an interesting discussion to have with members of that group.
Yeah, and it was a good call by the Deputy, Jeff Loy, who, as we left the State Crisis Centre, I thought it was time to start heading south and head home. But we were such on a high, we went to go get a coffee, and the boss goes, let's go see the team, and he'd organised to go and meet the State Protection guys that actually stormed the building. So we went in there, they all got corralled into a meeting room, and Jeff had a chat to them and just obviously thanked them for the work they had done. But as I looked around the room, I saw a mate of mine who actually had blood and wounds on his face, and I later found out, I went up and said to him, mate, what happened? And he said, I copped fragments at the time and I was shot as I went in. So I think he was shot with fragments from Monis as he entered the building. So I didn't realise at that time that he was there during the whole siege. So for me, it was kind of, a bit more personal, going, far out, mate, you were there all night. I was there all night. I didn't know you were there. And even interesting that when there's people who you don't know were there. I think once the event was over, the Commissioner came out and said that his wife and daughter were actually in the Lindt Café prior to it being taken over by Monis. So that was something the Commissioner held tight to his chest, that his wife and daughter were in there. So there was a connection for all of us there, and the good thing out of it, we learned a lot. We got new powers, and I got a great friend out of Louisa Hope, and so did New South Wales Police Force for what she does to us.
When you're watching these things from afar, as folks do, TV, it was almost like 24-hour coverage. I mean, it happened right across the road from Channel 7, literally. And you look at police like your State Protection Group, and you look at them going into a location like that, and to the outside looking in, they're almost quite robotic. They're almost like stormtroopers from Star Trek or something. They've got all the gear on and the night vision goggles if they're wearing them, and in they go. But it's easy to forget that inside all of that gear, like with the riot police, and inside that there's people who husbands, they're possibly wives, some of them their fathers, their sons, daughters, and that can easily be lost, I think, in something like this. It's when you're looking at it from the outside, and it's just interesting, Chris, that you speak about that personal connection that you had with one of those SPG guys.
Yeah, well, I mean, in an emergency action, I've been there myself, where you just make the decision, we're going in, you'll boot a door in and you'll go in. You don't think about what you're saying there about the family and that I'm a husband and this, that and the other. But these poor buggers had to sit around for so long, and a number of them actually text home and said goodbye. They thought it was over. They thought they were going into a live bomb. So they knew they were going to have to go in at some point, but they had so much time to sit around and wait and think about it, as opposed to just it's happened, get in there, go. So that's what the mind games for them, and to then let them go through those mind games, and then you watch them on TV and see them robotic. That's how professional they were. They put all that aside, game on, helmet on, in we go, and hats off to them.